4, 3, happy 1998! It's snowing in New York, but it's snowing confetti.
Well, everyone, it's that wonderful time of year again. That time of year where we sit back, we relax, we cozy up by the fire, we throw in a movie with our family, and we prepare for the imminent collapse of Western society. Well, aside from that, it is that time of year that I come to really like. I don't know why, but I've started to become really fond of the end of the year and looking back at the year. This was a video that I made last year for 2023, and it's one of my favorite videos that I've made that isn't just a short film. So, as if to make a tradition out of it, I am here once again in 2024 to do the same thing. I'm going to be splitting this video into 3 parts, the first part of which will include everything that I enjoyed in the year, as well as the things I didn't enjoy in terms of movies and television. I saw a lot of entertainment this year, and it was a bit of a different year for me in terms of the range of what I watched, and actually watching a lot more TV than I normally do. The second part will look into all the projects that I did this year, including the short films and videos that I made for this channel, as well as some of the videos that I didn't quite get the chance to actually make in time for the end of the year. It was a crazy year for me in terms of my journey as a videographer and a cinematographer and a director. I did a lot of work this year, and I actually managed to make a lot more short films than I thought I could. And the third part will go over my thoughts and outlooks as we're going into 2025. I have a lot to say about the coming year and my thoughts for it because a lot is coming next year. Both in my life, the media and entertainment industry, and just the world in general. 2025 is a big year that I do want to talk about at the end of the video. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, like I was saying earlier, 2024 was a really good year for me in terms of just what I watched. I managed to watch a lot more movies than I got around to watching last year, though there were a lot of movies that I just didn't really have the time to see. It was a busy year for me, so I didn't always have the time to go to the movie theater, and the other thing with going to the movies costing around $40 a person almost, it's not really something I do as often. It has to be a movie I really want to see for me to really go spend the money. But I did manage to see a lot of films this year and actually got around to seeing a lot of the movies that I really wanted to see. So like I said, I saw a lot of movies this year, but what were my favorites? Which ones did I think were good and which ones did I think were bad? Now, this is all subjective, and what you find your favorite in a year will always change depending on who you ask. And the movies that I thought were the best and the movies you might think were the best could be completely different. And just because I say that this one's the best for me doesn't mean it's going to be the best for you. I know that that's probably said in like every film recap video, but I just kind of wanted to say it. Especially because the things that I thought were my favorite films this year are very subjective. So I had 2 films that came out this year that were my favorites. Okay, so these are going to be very different, but just bear with me for a second here. So my 2 favorite movies were Dune Part 2. I think that's a pretty easy guess for like a favorite movie of the year. I mean, it's Dune Part 2. It's incredible. And my other film would be Transformers 1. Like I said, very different pick for best movies of the year. I don't know which one of these I would decide is my ultimate favorite. I'd say between the 2, I'm probably more likely to rewatch Transformers 1 than I will to just rewatch Dune 2. But that's just because Dune 2 is a much longer movie that requires more watching, where Transformers 1 is a lot more just quick, easy entertainment. It's fun, and it doesn't require as much to just kind of sit down and watch. But both of these were my favorite films this year. They were both the movies that I found myself enjoying the most, the ones that I talked about the most, wanted to go back and rewatch the most, and so yeah, they're the ones I'm putting as my favorite. So let's talk about both of them.
Deal with this prophet. Send assassins.
Feyd-Rautha. He's psychotic.
I don't think there's a lot I could say about this movie that hasn't been said before, but for my personal opinion, I just want to say, holy shit, this was an incredible experience to go see in the theater. The visuals of this movie were some of my favorite cinematography that I've seen in a big Hollywood movie in a long time. I feel the way the cinematography is handled in Dune is a lot more serious and artistic than most other sci-fi movies. Instead of going always just for the big spectacle of shit tons of CGI and tons of spaceships like most sci-fi movies will, or how most sci-fi movies put all their focus into just how many CGI characters they can get get on screen at a time, or how many CGI battles they can have shaky cam with. Dune Part 2 cinematography focuses way more on artistic composition and color theory. Plus, there are so many scenes in this movie that just really push the bounds of camera work, especially the scene on the Harkonnen planet. Like, holy shit, the fact that they did this in infrared instead of just doing it like most movie studios would, where they probably would have just made the footage black and white in post. The actual effort to go out of their way and figure out the way to do this with infrared to get this specific look and get it to have this specific feel just shows me the amount of artistic integrity that they were bringing to this movie. It wasn't just a sci-fi. It's not just Star Wars.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
What the hell is even that?
It's not just popcorn entertainment. It's a legit movie that actually is trying to do some really difficult creative things. As someone who wants to be a filmmaker, doing something like this and using infrared to get a specific look, even though it's going to be a much harder technique, that's what makes filmmaking cool in my opinion. You go out of your way to do what makes the film better, regardless on how difficult it might be to achieve that. And you see that in every frame of Dune 2. Now, outside of just the cinematography, I think the directing is really well done. The pacing of scenes in this movie feel very appropriate. I find no scene lasts too long or too little. Everything just feels like it goes for just the right amount. The way characters react and how they react just feels really in depth. Also, the artistic choices for certain scenes to have no music and instead focus more on the audio and the sounds that are being created in the scene really just suck you in, and once again show me that this movie is being made by just true artists who really want to make something that's going to stand the test of time and not just be a sci-fi movie you watch once in the cinema and then forget about. These are some of the only movies I've actively gone out and bought on Blu-ray brand new. Usually I buy my movies from like the pawn shop or secondhand so that I don't have to pay as much. I'm a cheap, broke college student. Don't get mad at me. I don't have a lot of disposable income. But with Dune Part 1 and 2, I actively went and picked these movies up, especially 2. Once it was out, yeah, I wanted to get it. And I've watched these movies a bunch. They're really good. I also really like the color for these two Blu-rays back and forth with the orange and blue. It just looks really good. I think a lot of it is just amazing. Heck, even the acting has some actors I'm not a fan of. I'm not a big Timothée Chalamet fan, and yet I actively really enjoy him in these movies because I can't deny he does a good performance, and the way he embodies the character, it's really good, and I really enjoy him. He had some really fucking good scenes in this movie, and that's just, yeah, these were some of the best scenes and line delivery of the year for me, and I feel that Dune 2 is a movie that I'm actively going to watch for years to come. So yeah, Dune 2 easily gets about a 9 out of 10 for me.
Pax, you need to move out of my way before I move you myself. D, listen.
For my other pick for top movie of the year, we have Transformers 1. Holy shit, completely different than Dune 2, like I said before, but Transformers 1 is fucking awesome. This is the Transformers movie that I asked for as a kid, like begged for my entire childhood. I always said that the best Transformers movie would be if it was animated and took place entirely on Cybertron, not focusing on humans, but primarily focusing just on the Transformers and just Cybertron, their home world.
If we survive this, I'm gonna kill you! I accept those terms.
There's nothing interesting really about her. There are some good scenes in the early Transformers movies by Michael Bay, but the movies as a whole are just not that good. They're extremely racist.
What are we gonna do with this shrimp taco?
Just bump a cap in his ass, throw him in the truck, and then nobody gonna know nothing, not me.
Yeah, not in my trunk.
They're very inappropriate, horny as fuck, and hella racist. I didn't notice that as much as a kid, but going back to it as an adult, holy fuck.
Name's Willie. Yeah. Say my name. Say my name.
Someone needed to like calm down the people making these movies. And the best thing is Transformers 1 suffers from none of the problems that I feel the old Transformers movies had. The horniness and excessive racism is thankfully nowhere to be found. Instead, we have a movie that focuses primarily more on the relationship of Optimus Prime when he was still Orion Pax and Megatron when he was still known as D16.
You know, Sentinel says Megatronus was the strongest
prime to ever live.
I really loved this approach, and instead of us just having a typical Transformers movie that was just about a civil war, having it primarily first set up these characters and why you should give a shit for Optimus Prime and the Autobots, and also why you could maybe give a shit for Megatron and the Decepticons, and why you then may not like Megatron and the Decepticons and thus root for the Autobots, by having them be more fleshed out, seeing that backstory and seeing what led to the divide and fall of Cybertron into a civil war. The character writing was so good. The subtle nuances in seeing how Megatron's character doesn't just switch at one point. You can see subtle little hints that he's always like that from the very start of the film. Similar with Orion Pax, who becomes Optimus Prime. You can see the hints towards Optimus Prime's character very early on through the film, with his kind, compassionate, while albeit reckless behavior, always being about the pursuit of betterment, even if sometimes it comes at doing some rule-breaking things. I also must say that the voice acting in this movie is really fucking good. I was like everybody, wasn't a super huge fan that Peter Cullen wasn't going to be playing Optimus Prime, though I was able to understand because I knew that the movie was more focused on a young Orion Pax and less so about him as Optimus Prime. And I can't lie, when Chris Hemsworth was originally casted, I didn't have high hopes, but I was delightfully surprised. He did a very good job as Optimus Prime. I love the way he subtly changes his voice throughout the film, slowly sounding more stoic and leaderly as he gets into the role of being Optimus Prime. And especially once he does become Optimus Prime, I think he did a great job with the voice. It didn't feel like he was just trying to copy Peter Cullen, whereas he was more trying to embody the essence and the tones of what Optimus Prime should sound like.
We were given the power to change our world, and you chose to destroy it.
Same thing goes with Brian Tree Henry. You guys might recognize him as the voice of the dad from Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Miles. Mira, eso es imposible.
Where, I can't lie, I love his performance in those movies, and I was very excited to hear him as Megatron in Transformers 1, and he did an amazing job, just like Chris Hemsworth.
No more false prophets! Follow me, and you will never again be deceived!
The way he starts his voice off in a more friendly, almost very welcoming, compassionate, just chill bro kind of vibe at the start of the film, where he then subtly starts to add in more aggression and vibes of the villainy as the film goes on, is just so well done. I really love him as Megatron, and I think his speech is just, it's iconic. It's now my favorite Megatron speech. And the animation in this movie is also really good. Well, I wish it was a little bit more stylized to the degree of something like Spider-Verse, The Wild Robot, and Arcane. I'll still say that the animation does look really good. I do like how shiny Optimus looks, especially at the end of the film, and I like the way they show the scrapes and dents and make them look dirty at the start to make them look like miners. And Cybertron also looks really cool. This is one of the neater versions of Cybertron we've seen, and I really like how the surface world has that kind of 80s synthwave look to it, which really harkens back to the core of when Transformers started back in the early 80s. All around, Transformers 1 was easily my second favorite movie of the year, and kind of earned that way into the top spot alongside Dune 2. Having amazing characters, great animation, a good story, and all around, it's just stupidly entertaining and just a fun time to watch. I really hope it gets a sequel. I was really disappointed with how it bombed at the box office. I pray that Paramount makes a sequel to this, because oh my god, we could potentially have an animated War for Cybertron like movie, and that would be fucking unreal. If they did this good on the first movie, I'm down for whatever they have in store for the next one. So for me, Transformers 1 was an easy 8 out of 10. Go watch it if you haven't. It's fun. Give it a shot. Download it, stream it, buy it. Just show Paramount that people want a sequel to this movie. It's really good, and I trust that you'll enjoy it even if you're not a Transformers fan. Okay, so now that I've got my top 2 favorite movies out of the way, it's time to talk about the rest of the movies that I saw this year and the ones that I like. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really tend to watch movies that I think I'm gonna dislike, so I don't really have a lot of bad movies. This isn't like a top 10 best, top 10 worst kind of list. I'm mainly just talking about the ones I enjoyed. There's a few in here that I want to mention that I kind of think weren't great, because I think it helps to have that. But honestly, if I think the film's going to be bad, I just tend to stay away from it. So first, I want to talk about some movies that I feel not many people are talking about, but that I actively really enjoyed. Now, I think these movies were really good, and one of them is a movie that I heard almost nobody really talk about. So let's talk about that one first.
¿Lo ves? Hay que intentarlo.
Now, Society of the Snow is an amazing movie directed by J.A. Boyana. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this movie tells the story of the Andes plane crash that happened back in the 1970s. It involved a Chilean soccer team as well as some other people, telling the story of their heroism and how they survived and the difficult choices that they had to make in order to survive, as well as the perseverance that was made to get them out of that situation. I think this movie is an incredibly well-made film. The cinematography is definitely my personal kind of style. A lot of very close-up intimate shots that are meant to make you feel very claustrophobic and uncomfortable, which helps with what the situation is about. I also feel like the actors did an amazing job in this film. I really felt for everybody and came to really like a lot of the characters, and there was a lot of moments into this movie that did make me very sad. I think the ending was a bit of a gut punch, and I really liked everything it did and how it told the story, though I do think there was a little bit of pacing issues towards the beginning half, but I feel once the film kind of gets settled, it gets going, and I think the pacing does even out towards the middle and end. Now, the one thing that bugs me is it feels like nobody can talk about this movie without bringing up the 1993 film Alive, which tells subsequently the same story. And the reason this annoys me is because people keep labeling Society of the Snow a remake of Alive, when it actively is not a remake of Alive. It is not just Alive. No. That would be like saying Titanic is a remake of A Night to Remember. It's not at all. This is just another movie that is telling the story of the Andes plane crash, and it tells it very differently than Alive. Alive is one of my favorite survival movies based on a true story, and is one that I've actively watched a lot. And I can tell you that very quickly into Society of the Snow, I can tell it was going into a different approach in terms of the pacing and what it decided to put the central attention on. The character we follow in Society of the Snow is not the same as who Alive decided to follow. So they're actively very different, and I feel like that is a not really fair label to put on the film, because it might make a lot of people not want to watch it as it just looks like a remake. And I definitely recommend watching it because it's not. I'd give Society of the Snow an easy 8 out of 10.
The rich don't see us as people. Give me the job no one wants to do. I'll do it.
Monkey Man is the 2024 directorial debut of Dev Patel, as well as having him as the leading man in an Indian action movie that primarily in that its approach feels more like a Western action movie and doesn't fall into more of the tropes that you tend to see in more Bollywood Indian action movies like RRR. I feel like Monkey Man had bad marketing because it definitely made this movie look like it was going to be like an Indian John Wick and fully about action, and I definitely think you need to go into it knowing that it isn't really. It's a lot more about character and drama and past traumas and how one gets through them and utilizes that as strength to push themselves forward, less so than it is just straight up action. There are action scenes, but if you've seen the trailers, you've seen what those action scenes are. There's only a couple realistically in the film, and I kind of wish there was a little bit more. My other gripe was I actually wish he wore that monkey mask a little bit longer during the final fight because it looked really cool, and I don't know, I kind of wish he would have worn it a bit longer. This film also sports really good cinematography with some amazing action sequences that just had just a little bit too much shaky cam for my personal taste, but the non-action scenes have some really good cinematography that focuses a lot on intimate visuals and feeling very close up to our characters, as well as having scenes that make you very uncomfortable and scenes that feel very bombastic and fast. It's definitely a really good action movie that I would recommend to anybody, and I haven't seen too many people talk about after it came out.
What a wonderful day! What a wonderful day! Are we thankful for the words of Caesar?
And last but not least, in my 3 films that I feel not many people talked about, but I really enjoyed, was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. A 4th movie after Matt Reeves' trilogy of the Planet of the Apes films ended was definitely an interesting choice that at first I wasn't too sure of. While I was excited to get back into the world of Planet of the Apes and see more of what it had to offer, without Matt Reeves coming back to direct it, I was a little nervous on what we could expect. While Matt Reeves didn't direct the Rise of the Planet of the Apes film, he did come to direct the 2 sequels, which I think were everyone's favorites. They were my personal favorites. So without him coming back to direct, I was a little worried in where the films could go and if it would be able to match with the quality that Dawn and War had. But thankfully, I feel it did. Kingdom was really good and a very interesting addition to continue on past the trilogy of Matt Reeves films. Long past the days of Caesar and what we saw in the previous trilogy, we now pick up with a new cast of characters and apes nearly 300 years after the previous films. I feel like this was a good approach. One, it allowed us to get some new characters, but it also allowed for the world to feel a bit different from the last movies, while also having the world not fully be what it is in the original Planet of the Apes movies. We get a nice in-between, and I really enjoyed that. The film has a good cast of characters, and the main character is actually really likable. I actively really liked Noah, and I wouldn't mind seeing him come back for the future films. Although he's not as interesting as Caesar, that's a bit of a hard bar to step up to, especially because Andy Serkis was such an amazing actor in the role of Caesar. Though I do feel Noah has the power to be a very compelling leading man, and I wouldn't mind seeing another movie with him and these characters. I also have to praise the CGI in this movie. It's genuinely incredible, and a lot of scenes just had me with my jaw on the floor with how detailed the CGI looked and how realistic it was. There are scenes where like characters have a bit of blood and spit coming out of their mouth, and it's fully CGI, and it looks convincing as hell. Not to mention that when the apes get wet, their fur looks very realistic, and the way they get that whole like wet fur just looks spot on. The animators and the CGI artists on this movie genuinely were incredible, and they very much, I feel, met that bar that the past films had, and it didn't feel like it looked cheaper in comparison. And that was something I was very worried going into it. Easily, I'd give Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes a 7 out of 10. It was a great movie and definitely worth a watch if you enjoyed the trilogy that came before it. Now, 2024 was also like any year, a year of sequels. Non-fucking stop sequels. And we're gonna be getting that probably till the day we die, folks. They make $1 billion. They're not gonna stop. And I did see quite a few sequels this year. I mean, you realistically can't go to the movies right now without having to fucking watch either a remake or a sequel of something. Or a weird spin-off that shouldn't exist. Now, some of these sequels were good, and of course, some of them were, well, they weren't.
One more word. Please give me one. Gubernatorial.
Unfortunately, I had a video I was making earlier in this year that I did record but just never really got around to editing that was going to be talking about the upcoming film Deadpool and Wolverine, and about how I had some concerns for certain aspects of the film and for certain things that I was worried they would indulge in or make the mistakes of doing. And I really wish I had gotten that video done in time, because a lot of the things I was worried about ended up coming true. Deadpool and Wolverine is a good third film, but is not a good third film at the same time. It's a good Deadpool movie, but I don't believe it's a good trilogy film, and it does not fit in line with the other 2 movies that came before it. I do think there are a lot of good things about this movie, primarily the comedy. I'd say that this is probably the funniest of the 3 Deadpool movies. I'm not a really huge fan for the comedy in the Deadpool films. I feel it's very hit or miss for me. A lot of the comedy to me does not actively feel like the character of Deadpool that I've read in the comics, and I find it doesn't always match with the type of humor that you'd come to expect from the character if you've read it. But I can't lie that some of Ryan Reynolds' humor and his jokes do land with me and have made me laugh. There are times where he does get the essence of Deadpool accurate, but I find a lot of the time he's just playing Ryan Reynolds in the Deadpool costume and has now convinced most of the general public that that's how Deadpool is as a character. If you want to see more on this, go watch other YouTube channels that have talked about it. I'm sure it's been talked about. I just feel this way personally as a Deadpool fan, that the movies have never fully gotten the humor quite right, but I would say that the 3rd Deadpool movie is the closest to Deadpool's humor that I've seen. Even though this movie does indulge in the classic Ryan Reynolds type fourth wall breaks of just referencing things, I feel it was a lot more managed on this one and only done occasionally, so that it didn't feel redundant like it does in the 1st and 2nd Deadpool. This movie does rely much more on visual humor and gags with the wackiness of the characters than the first 2 movies did. And I really liked that. I will admit there were a lot more scenes in Deadpool and Wolverine that had me laughing than in the first 2 Deadpool films. I do think this film includes the funniest scene of the trilogy.
Oh, you dirty bitch!
This is just fucking hilarious, and I honestly think one of the best fight scenes in a Deadpool film. Utilizing Deadpool and Wolverine's powers and how everyone's wanted to see them fight. And while they do give us a fight in the beginning of the film that does feel more in line with what fans typically expect, I think this was a much better fight because it does something just funny and creative with them as concept. They're both stabbing the shit out of each other in the back of a Honda Odyssey, throwing each other through the windshields. It's insane, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the Deadpool trilogy and one of my favorite scenes probably in the MCU in terms of comedy. It's fucking hilarious. I also really like what this movie did in terms of with the Fox characters, bringing them back more in terms of a send-off to that time and era of films, which, yeah, I guess I'm pretty nostalgic too. I grew up during the early 2000s and the 2000s X-Men films, as well as this shit like the Fantastic Four films, Ghost Rider, Blade, Elektra, Daredevil. Yeah, I grew up on all that and I enjoyed it. I really fucking enjoyed it. I don't know why, but I did. But I really did like how this movie was a bit of a tipping the hat and a send-off to that era in more of a lighthearted way, recognizing that while the films might not always be good, they are films made by people who probably did try. And for the people working on it, they might look back at those movies as an amazing, fun time in their life that they had a great time working with some other amazing artists. And again, as someone that wants to go into filmmaking, that did kind of hit me right in the feels. I feel like that made the cameos feel less gratuitous and shoved in as just, hey, look who it is, hey, look at this, hey, look at that, and more of a, hey, remember this, they tried and they cared, and that's cool. Maybe you should care a little bit too. And thankfully, in the end, I didn't actually have as many gripes with this movie. That I was really worried it was going to rely heavily on having a prior knowledge of what's happened in Loki season 1 and 2, and I felt like that was going to be something that could weigh the film down, because if you're someone like me and maybe you've only watched the first season of Loki and didn't bother watching the second because you gave up on Marvel shows, that it would alienate you trying to watch the third Deadpool because it looked like it relied on you having some knowledge. And I definitely will say, if you haven't watched season 1 of Loki, you're gonna probably be fucking confused. But if you just turn your brain off and enjoy it the way Marvel intended without thought, I feel like you'll have a good time. It was definitely an entertaining movie, and I will definitely watch it again and find myself probably throwing it on more likely than I will the first or second Deadpool. Definitely a 7 out of 10.
The fuck was that?
Alien Alien Romulus was a really good sequel that also came out this year. Sorry, I just kind of had to make that joke. This movie is very, very similar to Alien Isolation if you've played that game, but I actually really enjoyed Alien Romulus. I feel like it fixed a lot of the problems I had with the past few Alien movies that have come out, and while there are things in them that I enjoyed, I feel that they started to trip themselves up with how convoluted they became, how deep they wanted to be and philosophical, and that they just started to trip over themselves with the amount of things they'd introduce and the constant need to just update the alien to something cooler than just the xenomorph itself. And I always felt that a return to form could help, and thankfully Alien Romulus very much feels like that approach. There was a lot that felt like it was trying to be reminiscent of the classic Alien films, and in some cases I think that's a good thing, and in some scenes I feel like it's a bit of a crutch and it's just trying to be like a hey, remember that. But the positives of the film are enough to bring it up in my opinion. The film is very well shot with some really good cinematography that does feel like it has a place right back in the early days of the Alien franchise, having a lot of really dark and ominous cinematography that relies more on singular colors or just one or two lights to make the scene illuminated. As well, the ship does feel very industrial and gross and just kind of wet and just disgusting like the original films, and I feel like that very much helped bring back the atmosphere that the original films had. Though to some degree it feels like it relies a little too heavily on just being like the original film and doesn't try a lot of things new. But I can't be a bit of a hypocrite because I just said one of the problems with the past few Alien films was trying too many things new, and so I can't then turn around and say one of the problems with this film is that it didn't try anything new. I feel like there's a mid-ground there you have to meet. Trying enough things new that it doesn't feel like you're retreading ground, but not too much that it feels like it alienates people from watching the film. Get it? Alienates? I do feel some of the new things it tries, though, are very well executed. I think it's a good movie, and if you're a fan of the Alien franchise, you've probably watched it, but if you haven't, it's worth checking out. 7 out of 10, very much enjoyed it.
Hello? I'm Anxiety. Where can I put my stuff? A new emotion.
Inside Out 2 is a sequel that I'm surprised I like. I'm not a huge fan of the first Inside Out movie, and I feel it's just a very okay Pixar film. Looking back on it, I don't think it's bad. I'm just not the biggest fan of it, and I just feel there were some better animated films coming out around that time. But I don't feel the same way towards the sequel. This doesn't just feel like they made a sequel just to make a sequel because the first one made money. Well, that is why it exists. Don't forget, movie studios are a business at the end of the day, and artistic integrity is usually always out the door. This movie justifies its existence by actively diving deeper into the concepts and ideas that the first movie set up. I like the way it furthers and starts to dive into puberty and the changes you go through as a teenager, primarily with dealing with anxiety. As someone who does have anxiety and has been diagnosed with it since I was 11 years old, it was nice to see a film actively portray it in an accurate light. And I know that that's probably something you've gotten tired of hearing. I do feel like it's actively done really well in this movie, and the way it visualizes a panic attack it's good. I feel like, especially for me, being that I wasn't as huge of a fan of the first one, the fact that I'm actively kind of excited for a potentially third Inside Out film goes to show how good the second movie is in building more with the characters, further expanding the world and the ideas and the concepts that the first movie sets up. I kind of want there to be an Inside Out 3. I'm not gonna lie. It's a good movie and I definitely recommend it, but you've probably seen it 7 out of 10. Now, not every sequel was good this year, and there were a few I saw that were fucking terrible, and that I wish I kind of hadn't. In 2023's recap video, I talked about how the year had one of the best modern Godzilla films that I had seen in recent years. I felt that it really struck back to the feeling and the core elements of the original 1954 film, and showcased the character of Godzilla in the way it should be. A very serious story that has actual emotion, heart, characters, and even human characters you actively can root for. It cannot say the same for the one that was made by America in 2024. Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire is really not good, and I can't even really say it's so bad it's good, or so cheesy it's entertaining. Heck, I can't even really say it's that much of an entertaining kaiju film. It's just not good. The thing I think is my biggest gripe with the film are the kaiju. We have a lot of kaiju in this film, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of variety. That's the quality of them. It's not really good. The scenes with Godzilla and Kong are few and far between. They basically have like 2 scenes together in the whole film, and then they team up and fight at the very end. And it's not good. Kong's screen time is kind of alright, with the film taking a bit of a subplot to focus on what he's kind of doing in this like Hollow Earth sort of setting, but it's just alright. It doesn't have really enough time, I feel, to breathe and really grow on you, but it is the better part of the film. Godzilla, on the other hand, has almost nothing going on in this movie. He's in one scene where he fights another kaiju, he goes into water, fights another one for like a 2-second scene, hibernates, comes out, picks a fight with Kong real quick, and battle. And while that is, I guess, a lot of Godzilla action, it's just not really a lot with him, and his scenes just are very rushed, and the way Godzilla moves in this movie really fucking pisses me off. He moves like a goddamn cartoon character, not a fucking 300, 400 foot monster lizard. He does not have weight to him, and it bugs the shit out of me because it feels goofy like a cartoon. And they've lost all the weight and realism that Legendary started off with back in the 2014 Godzilla. Even the little bit that they continued into the sequel, Godzilla King of Monsters, just feels like it's been completely abandoned at this point. It is not serious. In 1 year, you have an amazing Godzilla movie that has actual heart, character, good action, even some intense moments of fear, only for the next year to come around and give us one of Godzilla's worst films in recent years. Thankfully, it's not fully a Godzilla movie, it's a Godzilla x Kong movie, but still, it's really bad, and it's very boring. Don't even get me started on the human characters. All around, a very disappointing movie that I don't think I'll ever watch again. 3 out of 10. Now, the coolest part about 2024 in terms of what I watched was I actually watched a lot of television this year. I've always been more of a movie person. It's much easier for me to get into a film than it is for me to get into a TV show. I feel that's because films take less of a commitment. You're telling me I have to sit here for an hour to 3 hours hours at most to consume this story. Okay, you're telling me I have to sit here for 8 to 9 hours just to consume some of this story? No. For that, I've always found it has to be something that really like can hook me and just interest me into wanting to marathon it. But my girlfriend actually has gotten me into watching a lot more television shows. Well, when we're not just rewatching episodes of Modern Family and Gilmore Girls.
Vi thinks you've changed.
She can't accept what you and I know.
We have to talk about Arcane. Even though it just came out a few weeks ago and it's only just ended and I only just finished watching the season 2, holy fuck, that was good. Can we all agree that was amazing? Like absolutely fucking amazing. They really upped the bar in season 2, just delivering a fantastic season. On all aspects, it felt like they improved. I was really worried going into season 2 that it was gonna look worse than season 1 because it seemed like they had less of a time to work on season 2 than they did with season 1, but that is not the case. Season 2 looks phenomenal. You can see where the budget went in every single frame of this show. It is spectacular, it is detailed, it's intricate, the lighting is beautiful. There are moments in the show that genuinely break out into different styles of animation and always keep you engaged with new ideas and new ways that the show can just feel grand and spectacular. The fight scenes are incredible. The detail in them, the choreography, the intensity of them, and I just love the way the effects are 2D animated in a sort of respect. As well as the fights this season feeling like they have a lot more weight and consequences. Characters do die, and I did like that because it just makes this world feel serious. Someone who doesn't play League of Legends, I loved that you were able to follow along and understand the things that were being set up and the new lore that was being explained to the audience. It was always in a way that felt digestible and understandable, regardless if you were a prior fan of the games. I feel like that's this show's biggest strength, is that it's something you can enjoy regardless if you already are a fan of League of Legends. If you like big, grand, epic, beautiful television and series and you want to get really sucked into a very uniquely designed world that has amazing world building, intricate designs and character designs, well-written characters with good arcs that actively have very emotional impacts. I mean, this series got it all. It's got action, it's got good music, good animation, good writing, good acting. What else could you want? It really hits the ball out of the park. I'll give season 2 of Arcane a 9 out of 10. It was genuinely the best show I watched this year, easily.
You can try to stop me all you want, but I'm never gonna stop!
Another heavy hitter this year for me, which kind of came as a surprise as it wasn't something I even knew about or was excited about when the year began, was Dandadan. This show is so good. Me and my girlfriend have been marathoning it and just watching every episode as they come out. We love it. I think she's almost more excited for episodes to come out than I am. She'll remind me every Thursday that a new Dandadan episode is out and that we need to sit down and fucking watch it. I did read the manga, as I actively got into the manga about 2 months before the anime started to release. I don't know what it was, but something kind of just caught my interest and I was like, might as well go give it a shot. I picked it up. I really enjoyed it. I'm fully caught up on the manga and I love the series. I love where the anime could go with it. And I think that the anime adaptation by Science Saru is just fan-fucking-tastic. You can definitely feel they didn't just want to do a basic adaptation of the source material like most anime does. It's not just a one-to-one panel recreation just with color, with still frames and boring animation. No, 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 no. This has some really cool, very unique animation and the characters are almost always moving. That is something I like. There's not a lot of stillness in the show. The animation is always very fluid and going and energetic and just alive. I really also like the lighting and color of the show. I find most anime have scenes with just very boring, flat, cartoon-like lighting, and I prefer when my anime has more realistic sort of lighting because I just really like that aesthetic. And Dandadan very much does that. It completely nails the approach of very cinematic lighting for certain scenes, as well as utilizing some really cool color lighting and dynamics for things with the ghosts and the aliens in the series. Having their scenes stand out with really cool color effects that take over the whole scene and instantly tell the audience what's going on and that it's an alien or ghost. I also really love Okran and Momo. They're like my favorite couple. I ship them. Another big anime this year was the 7th season of My Hero Academia. Whether you like it or not, I feel like it has to be admitted that season 7 really stepped the bar up. I'm not as big of an anime fan of My Hero Academia. I'm more of a manga reader, and I love the manga more than I ever will like the anime, to the degree that I actively almost gave up on the anime after season 5 and season 6 just not feeling as good as I felt that they could be. But I didn't feel that same way towards season 7. The new director very much stepped up to the plate and decided to really make the anime feel back to how it felt in season 1 and season 2. There were tons of really big action moments that I feel very much pushed the budget of what they could do, but they handled them, I feel, respectfully, with grace. Sure, I feel that the anime could be better, but I feel like it actively did a very good job with what we've come to expect from Bones, and kind of impressed me in a lot of scenes. There were some scenes I was expecting to look a lot flatter than they did because of the way Bones has had a tendency to animate the series, but actually came out much better than I was anticipating, and some very well done sequences. There still were the occasional instance of still frame and My Slideshow Academia, but I have to give them credit where credit's due, and I definitely feel like they stepped up the bar in terms of animation this season. This is easily the best season of My Hero Academia from start to finish, with the most entertainment you could get. It's basically an entire war arc for the whole season, and if you're a fan of the series, I feel like you're gonna like it, and I feel like even if you're not as big of a fan of the last few seasons, there's a lot in this season to really kind of turn you around and keep you entertained and on the edge of your seat. I'm very much looking forward to what they could do in the next and final season, and yeah, all around I'll give it a solid 6 out of 10.
This is over!
Mark.
Mom.
The second season to Invincible that I feel didn't do as good of a job as season 1 did. I also had a video that I was planning on making about the split that season 2 decided to do midway through the middle, and how I feel that could affect the future of the show, as well as how I feel that permanently affects a lot of the writing in the show. But I never quite got around to editing it or finishing it, so the video just never came out. And again, I kind of wish I had, because a lot of those things I felt very much were true with season 2. It was not as good as season 1, and you can very much feel a bit of a downgrade in some aspects. First off, the animation felt much flatter compared to season 1, which is saying something, because I felt season 1's animation was very flat aside from a few action sequences. But season 2 is primarily flat through almost all of it. Even some of the action sequences in season 2 just don't feel like they have the same oomph and impact that some of the action sequences in season 1 did. Particularly in the finale, it just didn't feel like it hit as hard as the finale of season 1. I also feel like the show taking much more of a melodramatic approach to certain events and characters in the series is sometimes a good thing, but sometimes can weigh down episodes to feeling very boring, and sometimes watching very stilted animated characters just having dialogue that's not the most interesting, with not really the best looking visuals, and I feel will start to turn people off. A lot of people came to the show for good characters, good story, but a lot of really cool world building and action in the superhero animated genre, and I feel season 2 was just very melodramatic, taking certain events from the comics that didn't have as much melodrama and overemphasizing how melodramatic they were. And with a lot of the problems I had with Invincible season 2, it does have me worried for the direction that season 3 could be headed. We just got a trailer literally like yesterday as of recording, and a lot of my worries and complaints with season 2 look to have gotten worse with season 3. The animation looks even cheaper, even more flat, and just doesn't look good. It looks like we're gonna get more melodrama that I don't really remember the comic having, and there's just changes that feel like okay, but it just looks flat. I'm excited for season 3 of Invincible, but at the same time, season 2 kind of left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, and hopefully season 3 can fix it. There's some really cool things that are coming in season 3 as a comic reader. Yep, there's a lot of really cool shit that could happen in season 3, but with the way the show's been adapted, I'm not as excited as I should be.
Bloody hell. You ain't your own voice, don't ya? That's the spirit, champ.
Now, I feel like there's a lot to talk about with this season. It's definitely the weakest season of the show in a lot of aspects. I feel like we're starting to kind of drag on in ways. A lot of characters in this season felt like they had nowhere to go and no real plot or anything realistically happening to them, or that the show was just trying to make plots that felt very contrived because it realized that there wasn't really a lot going on. The show has very much overstayed its welcome, and I don't think was meant to ever go to 4 seasons, and you can feel that very much with how the season ends. Personally, while there are some big changes at the end of the season, I feel like barely anything really happened. Most of what happened was just in that last episode to last 2 episodes. Most of the season felt like we were going nowhere. It just wasn't as good. It was definitely the weakest season. I'm kind of excited for season 5. I think if it's the last season and they just go fucking bombastic with it, it could be good, but at the same time, I definitely feel like the show has overstayed its welcome.
Well, that was a lot of movies and shows to talk about. So much so that while editing this video, I kind of realized I need to split it into 2 parts. Turns out that I kind of rambled on for so long that this turned into about a 45-minute long video. If you've made it this far, then you know that. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get the second part out in time for the new year. I mean, obviously with this releasing today, there's no way I can release the second part in time, though it will be out within at least the next week to week and a half. I had to delay some of the shooting for it because I got a little busy and just didn't do it in time, so it'll be coming out sometime in January. The second half will be going over all the films that I made this year, as well as my thoughts and outlooks towards 2025 and the year as we're going into it. I'm pretty scared for a lot of things happening in 2025, both with the world and my personal life. It's going to be a very big year with a lot of challenge and a lot of growth. I hope you enjoyed the video. It took me a while to edit this, and if you got this far and actually watched all of it, thank you very much. It means a lot to anyone that actually watches these videos and likes to listen to me ramble. They're fun to make, and I really enjoy making this. So if you like it, always remember to hit like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below on what were some of your favorite films this year. I always love to read and reply to comments, so make sure to leave them down below. My name is Touche. Hope you all had a wonderful and fantastic holidays and have a happy and safe New Year's. I'm excited for mine. I have both a camera gig tonight as well as a 1920s style party to go to. So I'm gonna be partying it up like the Great Gatsby tonight. Cheers, everyone.
Burger King has a great gift idea for the holidays that'll go a long distance. No, not another necktie for Dad. Or a necklace for Mom. Get up to 15 minutes of free crystal clear communication from US Sprint when you buy a $5 book of Burger King gift certificates.